So picture this. Top secret experiments, mind control, and spy cats, all during the Cold War era. It's like a real-life sci-fi movie, but this movie actually happened. Welcome back. We're your host, Savannah.
And Kaylin.
So, what the hell is MK Ultra? So MK Ultra is the code name for a secret CIA program that was all about exploring mind control techniques. The CIA basically wanted to gain the upper hand with a truth serum during the Cold War. And they also thought that brainwashing people could be the key to unlocking secret intel. And about the truth serum, from my research, I think they were using LSD pretty much as the truth serum.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they thought it would kind of like loosen people's lips, basically, and
Yeah,
kind of
because you don't know what you're going to talk about.
Exactly. So the government went all out with this crazy idea. They roped in scientists, and they even recruited Nazi researchers, which look into Operation Paperclip if you're interested in more details on that.
Okay.
But these experiments that the government conducted, they're super messed up. They slipped unsuspecting Americans LSD like it was candy, just to see how their minds would react. Which, by the way, the government, I heard, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I heard that the government created LSD specifically for these experiments. So
I believe that.
If someone else knows more about that, let us know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. I would believe it.
Yeah.
Psychedelic drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and electroshock therapy were some of the other techniques used on human test subjects. The program was also intended to develop an anti-interrogation serum to counter the Soviet truth serum. So basically, the U.S. government caught wind that the Soviet Union had a kind of truth serum that they were going to use in the military and use against the U.S. So they're like, okay, let's try to get ahead of them. You know, it's the Cold War. That's what they were doing anyways.
Yeah.
So the U.S. tried to create their own, but in doing so, they ended up doing these horrible experiments on their own American people, which is really messed up.
And not to mention celebrities.
Wait, what do you mean?
I've heard that a lot of celebrities were involved in this experimentation.
Really?
Yes. There's theories out there that multiple celebrities have been, involved in that.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Because you look at like videos whenever it shows like who was it, Katy Perry?
Like,
yeah, like glitching or like they're like eye twitch.
Yeah, that's super weird to me. I've seen some videos that I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's sketchy. How is that happening?
Right.
But yeah, I have seen that before, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
But, so, unfortunately, these experiments obviously had some tragic consequences. People suffered long-lasting psychological damage, and the worst part is, most of them had no idea what was happening to them, which is super scary to me. The CIA has no proof and no documentation of consent forms. And they didn't even bother to follow up with these people after they experimented on them.
So do you have any information as far as, like, their proof that it happened? Not saying that I'm skeptical, but I'm just curious.
Actually, yeah, because there are the declassified documents.
Oh, gotcha.
Are
Okay,
available to the public. And that's pretty much how that ended up happening, was the documents were declassified and the public became aware of it, which I'm about to get into that.
Okay,
but we will, side note, we will link the declassified MK Ultra documents in the description.
I'm going to read them too.
For anyone that wants to browse, if you're curious and you want to go down a rabbit hole, because this is like a basic overview, but there's a lot more that went on, and there's a lot more detail of what the government did and how far they went with their human guinea pigs, which is terrible. And I was reading also that it was typical not to have doctors on hand the night after the experiments. which you'd think
Oh.
you'd want to have them around to check in on them and make sure that everything's going to plan and
But
that
that's
they're
sketchy.
helping me. Very sketchy. Honestly, I'm kind of prone to believe that some of the people probably weren't even like real doctors that were doing these
Oh
experiments.
yeah.
But sometimes the CIA would force their victims even more drugs to help them sleep better.
Oh
So it's
God.
like, oh, you're having trouble sleeping because we're brainwashing you and we're deprogramming you and putting all these drugs into you that you didn't ask for. Oh, okay, well, here's some more drugs. Enjoy, sleep well.
This
Like,
should help.
yeah, it's
It
like,
kind of it kind of fits with big pharma in general today, honestly.
literally, exactly. And like,
Not that some
they
medical drugs aren't important. They are, but
they are, but it's to the point of where like everything else can't be an option, so big pharma
right.
can thrive, basically.
Exactly.
But so the truth did eventually come out with MK Ultra, as it tends to do.
Okay.
And in 1973, the US Congress launched an investigation known as the Church Committee to examine the program activities. The public was shocked, to say the least, to learn about the extent of these secret experiments because they had no idea that any of it was going on. And it might be
Yeah.
more like public knowledge now. I want to say about, a majority of the public knows about MK Ultra to some extent. But
I heard about it, but I didn't know like details, you know.
back then they had no idea this was going on under their noses. It could have been
Yeah.
happening to their friends, their
Mhm.
families, could have happened to them. Um, but guess what?
What?
Most of the MK Ultra documents were destroyed. I wonder why.
Of course they were.
Super sketchy.
Of course they were.
Um, but in 1982, four victims came out and they attempted to sue for long-lasting mental damage, which I would too.
Yeah.
One of the plaintiffs, Varel Kirk, was dosed non-stop with a variety of drugs, and soon after he attempted unaliving himself by burning and hanging. He even attempted to gnaw off one of his arms.
And it didn't happen? Like
What do you
he
mean?
survived all of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
Survived.
God.
And then he went with these other three victims. I believe all four victims that sued were from the same penitentiary. They were basically prisoners in this penitentiary, and the government used them as testing subjects.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they came back and they sued them once everything came out years later. And they knew that they were protected. But obviously, like, if you're a victim of these experiments, you're going to deal with some psychological damage that's going to stick with you for life.
Yeah.
Like, I was reading another story about one of the victims. She was a female. I don't remember her name. But she was saying that she knows nothing about her former life. She doesn't remember her old name. She doesn't even really remember how, like, the world worked before all these experiments. She said they basically,
Wow.
like, stripped her of her past and, like, her real life and gave her a new life and a new identity. And it was really hard for her to work past that afterwards, of course.
You know what's
You know?
crazy? Remember how last week I talked about Montauk experiment and how it relates to Stranger
Yeah.
Things, and this is like similar? In Stranger Things 11, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, she finds her mom that was stripped from her when she was a baby.
Oh, wow.
And her mom, they shocked her until she lost all of her memories.
Oh, my God.
And literally,
Oh,
she's like unable to talk or do anything, like function, but she's still living. And like
yeah.
Eleven's able to communicate with her by like doing deprivation tanks.
Interesting. Because
So, just
sensory
throwing that in there.
deprivation was one of the techniques the government used, or the
Yeah,
CIA used. So it's very
yeah,
interesting. I was
exactly.
also reading that obviously Stranger Things is based off of like Montauk and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, like we talked about last week. But I
Mm-hmm.
found out that there's also elements of MK Ultra in there,
Yeah, well, that's
which
probably one of
explains a
them because
lot.
thinking, like, as you're saying all these things, I'm like,
Yeah, you're like, wait a second.
yeah. And it makes me want to go get in a deprivation tank because what if I got some powers?
Dude, I've been wanting to do that for a
Let's do
long
it.
time. I've
We
been
can go
wanting
together.
to.
Because
All right.
they have places where it's like one room with like multiple pods in it.
Yeah, I would have to do that with more than one person because, like, what if I pass
Yeah.
out or something and I don't know, like,
See,
you
my
know what I
thing
mean?
is when I'm like, let's say I float in the pool.
Yeah.
I can't stand hearing my own breathing. So all I'm gonna hear being in that pod is like,
I love how that's your main reason for not doing a sensory deprivation tank is because of your breathing. Like,
yeah, like I'm breathing.
you're like, I'm gonna sound like Darth Vader over here. Like, that's great. So, I have a little bonus tidbit.
Ooh,
We're pretty
okay.
much done with MK Ultra, like the overview of it. And if
Yeah.
you guys want to look more into it, I highly encourage you to look it up.
Yeah.
We'll link the documents, like I said earlier. So now we're gonna go into spy cats.
Ooh.
The year was 1966, during the height of the Cold War. The CIA was on the hunt for innovative ways to gather top secret intelligence. So someone came up with the crazy idea of recruiting cats as secret agents, and they called it Operation Acoustic Kitty.
What?
No joke. No joke. It's Operation Acoustic
I
Kitty.
never heard of this.
I love it.
Is that
So
where like all the spy
basically,
cat shit came from?
yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
basically, the CIA invested millions of dollars and years of research into this project. They surgically implanted listening devices and microphones inside the cats. But beyond that, they needed special training. So these spy cats went through intense espionage boot camps where they learned to sneak, eavesdrop, and even blend in with their surroundings.
Someone
So
looked at a cat and was like, "This little bitch will make a good CIA agent."
they look sneaky. I'm not gonna lie. Like I could see how someone could like come up with that idea.
Yeah.
But like I just feel like animals,
It's so
unless we're really
wrong.
talking about like dogs and maybe a few others, they're just so unpredictable. You just
Yeah.
never know. But eventually, after all this training for the spy cats, it came time for the CIA to put them to test in a real world operation. So they sent one brave cat on a mission to spy on some important looking people in a park. Super high stakes, right?
Yeah.
So basically, when the spy cat was creeping closer to the target, suddenly a group of pigeons showed up.
Not
Spy
on my
Cat got
turf.
distracted. Spy Cat got sidetracked and started chasing the pigeons instead of gathering intel. The project was eventually discontinued because the CIA realized that cats were just too unpredictable for spy
Yeah.
work. So that wraps up MK Ultra and Spy Cats, which went on at the same time. Like we said earlier, for those that want to go down the rabbit hole even deeper, we're going to link to those documents. And if you enjoyed this trip into the mysterious world of MK Ultra and Spy Cats, hit that like button, share this
Yes.
video with your conspiracy loving friends, and subscribe to our channel.